we're going to be joined by my co-host Lawrence, along with some other special guests here very shortly. And I thought maybe we would just start by saying, well, here's the annual joke. As of right now, it is approximately 9:09 Eastern time. I think we're ready to call the election. Results with just a couple of results coming in. I think I can confidently say with 100% accuracy, the ruling class in a solid winning streak has won the 2024 election. Hey, good for them. Oh man.
What a surprise.
I know. Like, I'm in shock. Yeah. But so okay, so there's our annual joke. But so again, we've got a lot of ground to cover on the program. I thought let's go ahead and start with a little bit of maybe prognosticating, our crystal ball out, and kind of wondering what our predictions for tonight are. And again, I actually have not looked at any of the election results yet, which is not intentional. I'm dealing with technical difficulties, so it's making it very difficult to multitask. But I thought maybe we could just kind of popcorn around and talk about maybe some of our predictions. So
Do you want me to give you a quick, actual rundown of current?
actually, that would be really helpful. I do have people in Zoom chat who have access to the internet. So yeah.
All right. So our current official, as part of, according to Associated Press, has Kamala Harris with 99 electoral college votes and Trump with 137. For anyone new, the winner is the first one to 270. Kamala Harris has confidently won New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, Maryland, and is currently leading in Maine and Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania with a actually significant margin of the vote with 61% to 38%. Michigan is also currently leading for Kamala Harris. And Wisconsin, we don't have any results from yet. Of course, anyone that's been listening to most pundits, the blue wall of Michigan and Wisconsin plus Pennsylvania would already guarantee Kamala Harris the win. Currently, she is leading in Missouri, Kansas, and Colorado as well, which would almost turn it into a blue belt because there is an expectation that she may also win Nevada and Arizona.
That is true. We've got I think they have an abortion ballot initiative in play.
Yeah,
Um,
so the bad news on that one. It was kind of set up to fail to begin with. Florida had one of the larger 6-week abortion bans, hopefully going to be overturned today. Um, it has 55% of the vote, but it requires 60% of the vote. So currently, Florida is going to have an extremely prohibitive abortion ban, and also on the Florida ballot was going to have the legalization of recreational marijuana, and that seems to also be the exact same case, about 55% with but needs 60% to pass.
oh wow. Okay. Could you run that by me just one more time? So, where was that marijuana ballot initiative? I'm sorry.
Both of those were for Florida. They both need 60% to pass. Florida currently has a 6-week abortion ban, and it was to enshrine abortion protections in the Constitution of Florida. It would have required at least 60% of the vote. They only have 55% right now. It's seeming like it's not going to reach the number needed. And the same thing with legalization of marijuana for recreational use there, required 60% and currently has 55%. Um,
Ah,
other other battleground states that people are watching closely. Georgia currently has a slight lead for Donald Trump with 52% to 46%. However, a lot of the Atlanta counties are yet to be counted. Virginia and North Carolina are also too slim right now. Virginia, 49.8% Trump, with 40 48.5% for Kamala, and North Carolina with 51.9% for Trump, and Kamala Harris with 47.1%. Another thing that one thing that that personally for us as leftists, not a lot of vote coming through in most of these for Jill Stein, with even in some places the Robert F. Kennedy having more votes than her in some states, with him being someone that's completely dropped out of the election and endorsing Trump. So currently we don't have a lot of the more battlegroundy states that would have had a higher turnout for Jill Stein to begin with. But at least it seems like they're not going to be able to blame it on leftists this time.
Yeah, they'll have to blame it on RFK voters, the very persistent RFK voters.
Yeah. So the currently Kamala Harris in Michigan has 52.5% with 31,000 votes, and Trump has 45.7% with 47,000 votes. Jill Stein only has 4,000 votes, and RFK has 2.5K.
Yeah, thank you, Eduardo, for keeping us updated on that. It looks like Andy is just dropped somehow. I'm not sure how that happened, but I guess we're still having technical difficulties. Very, very unconventional thing to happen. One thing I don't even know if we're still recording. It still says recording. Okay. All right. Well, one thing that's for sure, the race for Georgia would be a lot less, up in the air if the Democrats didn't, local Democrats within Atlanta didn't block the ballot initiative to stop Cop City. Now, you've probably already heard of this, but the Cop City has been very unpopular in Georgia. They plan on cutting down a lot of forest for the uninitiated. They plan on cutting a lot of forest in a city known for its forest to build a fake city that they will use as a police training facility in just outside of Atlanta, right next to a majority Black and brown neighborhood. So a lot of people really banded together both across anti-racist activists, climate activists, anti-police movements to try and stop Cop City. And they even did attempts to do things the quote unquote correct way by going through the government process. And they got a massive amount of 100,016 signatures from the city of Atlanta.
Nora, I'm actually sorry. If you could maybe just back it up a little bit. So we had some audio cut off. I was trying to get the meeting ID to Lawrence, and I had to back out of the meeting. But you're referring to, and I don't know what the numbers look like in Georgia, but just for some context, are you talking about that? So there's that article about the Cop City ballot initiative.
Yeah, I saw it was still recording, so I kept it rolling. But yeah, we were talking about Cop City and how they the ballot initiative that was attempting to stop it got over 100,000 signatures, which would very much have been able to help tip the scales in favor of the Harris campaign by bringing people to motivate them for a very important and very popular local issue of stopping Cop City. If the turnout of Atlanta is that crucially important for the swing state of Georgia and the Harris campaign, then it really was a massive misstep on the part of the Georgia Democrats to push back against this. So it really is upsetting to see some them fumble the bag in that regard. It's really another example of federal and even to an extent state and local Democrats really failing to reach out to the left and really relying on liberals to hope that lesser evilism can, win her, eke her out another victory.
Yeah, no, exactly. And it really is like a tragic story of, the Democratic Party just rolling up a newspaper and batting the people they need to, for an electoral coalition to win, just batting them repeatedly on the nose. Again, because they have those particular capitalist interests and such. Looks like Lawrence, we were finally able to get you on. How are you tonight on this auspicious night of all nights, I suppose?
I mean, I'm pretty good, man. I'm watching the news coverage like everybody else, man.
Mhm.
How's the rest of the folks? Some of my other politically astute friends would like to join, so I know some of them are going to be joining us shortly. So, but yeah,
Oh, okay, great. Yeah. So why don't we kind of go through, I wanted to kind of popcorn now that we got like the co-hosts on. We in about 10, 15 minutes are going to be joined by William Stodden and Stephanie Cholensky, who are running on the Socialist Party USA ticket for president. That should be an interesting conversation. But I wanted kind of quick popcorn predictions, and I was kind of thinking, like, who do we think is which faction of the ruling class do we think is going to take the bag tonight? Um, and we kind of just got to go around and give our quick predictions. I personally, and I don't like to say this, I think it's gonna be Donald Trump. I think the Kamala Harris campaign's momentum has just completely crashed out. They've really snatched defeat from the jaws of victory, ostensibly by positioning themselves in kind of this late campaign hour as the second coming of George W. Bush. They've increased or I said not increased, they've embraced neocons. They've largely sidelined Tim Walz. A lot of people don't really even know who he is, other than everybody's dad, apparently. Kind of what I thought at the outset is, if they really trumpeted his accomplishments in Minnesota, called for an arms embargo, and maybe even not even getting more progressive than Biden was in 2020, just kind of stay in that same lane, that it would have more or less been in the bag. I think now a lot of that momentum has been lost. It's going to be a very close race. Um, and I don't necessarily see Kamala Harris being able to eke over the top. I've been seeing really bad polling numbers among young people, and in particularly like early ballots coming through, which was kind of a saving grace in the last election. So I would not. I would be. It would be very sad, but I would not be surprised to wake up tomorrow in a 2016 situation where Donald Trump has handily won the Electoral College, and we all just got to spend the next 4 years fighting more overt fascism, I should say. Um, so I was actually, I'll give it to you now, Lawrence, because I think you had a slightly different read, and there are a number of reasons my prediction might come out incorrect, and I think you kind of articulated that earlier on the Media Cyphers page.
yeah. So I have Waltz Harris winning either 270, 276 to 318. Um, it's more as the night goes on, it looks like it's going to be closer to 270 to 276. Um, Most of the reasons why, like, yes, I agree with you that the Democratic Party and the Democratic establishment has basically learned the wrong lesson from 2020 to 2022 to now, that they don't need to cater to their base. They could basically spit in the eye of their base, cater to this mythological middle and Republican voters, and bring in this coalition that's looking like the neocons of the early 2000s. I think that is a terrible strategy. I understand why they're doing it, because they feel like they could get more of those crossover voters than needing to double down on their base. I would argue that because of Tim Walz and the Bernie Coalition and some of the other progressives in the space, they have helped, that if they would have gone into a more populist vocabulary, and you saw a lot of that economic populism, especially in the last few weeks, with Waltz doing interviews with with uh Republicans and undecided voters and basically flipping them in real time. This is also the first election since Roe v. Wade's been overturned, since January 6th, since the Nazi rally that the neo-Nazi like rally that they had in Madison Square Garden, since they had a North Carolinian governor that was running that called himself a black Nazi. There's been a number of unforced errors on both sides. The Democrats running on a we are not going to separate ourselves uh from big money donors in Gaza and letting AIPAC flood our campaigns to take out other like-minded Democrats. The unforced error of not in any way, shape, or form saying to the Arab brothers or sisters or to back to the base that we hear y'all and we are actually will listen to you. But on the other side, the Republicans have done everything that they can do to say we're not like y'all. They're not like us. And when they say they, I mean white men, racist white men. Yeah, they're not like us. They're not the rest of this country. They insulted women. They insulted the Latinos and Puerto Ricans. They've insulted black people. They've done everything in their power to step on every rake to try to get to this finish line. Like there's not a pothole on this road to victory that they have not hit. And I feel like the Republican Party in today's day and age is the dog that chased the car. And the car just happened to stop. And now that dog has headbutted that car. Because there's a number of from what I've seen, a large number of votes of older women, independent women are breaking towards Harris. There's a lot more women voting in this election than men. 1 out of 8 Republican females said that they voted differently from their husbands. Like there's a lot. There's 10 states that has referendums on abortion rights. So I feel like there's a lot, and also just like in 2022 the red mirage I feel like is real, where there's going to be a lot of early voting that's going to favor Republicans, and then when they finish doing the rest of the recount, it's going to end up turning to Democrats, and I see that happening. So do I think that she's going to win? Do I think that she's going to hit 300? No, but I do think that the Harris Waltz ticket will hit 270, 276.
All right. Nora, toss it over to you.
Yeah, so I think that like Harris is gonna eke this one out, like, but it's not gonna be a very decisive victory. I know that a lot of like the numbers leading up to her have looked good. In particular, the Seltzer poll in Iowa was looking like, wow, if like Iowa's +3 to the Democrats, then hey, that's a lot of things are possible in that direction. But I think that like there's a lot of other factors to consider here. I think what's going on, how she abandoned Arab voters in Michigan, and how she like the lack of the cops, the Stop Cop City bump in Georgia is really going to cost her. I also don't know if there will be enough of a push in enough of like a victory in places like Wisconsin or North Carolina for it. But I do still think that she'll get the rest of us. I think she'll still be able to win Pennsylvania at least. Like that's probably the out of all the swing states, I think she'll be able to eke that one out because of the anti-Puerto Rican racist comments that came out of Trump's Nazi rally at Madison Square Garden. I think that's really going to cost Trump a lot of states in the East Coast, especially in Pennsylvania, maybe even to a lesser extent in Georgia. But I do think that like this will be a narrow victory for Harris. And again, this should have been a very decisive victory because the enthusiasm for her, you know, perhaps like unquestioningly, like we'll critique that, of course, but like it was through the roof after the swap from Biden to Harris went through. Like donor and you know, base and like, you know, normie interest aligned for a very rare moment to give us something that everybody wanted. And there was a lot of excitement until it was immediately deflated. If she stuck with her plan of calling Republicans weird instead of calling Republicans her besties, then, we'd feel like that a lot of people would feel like that even more liberal people would feel like she's more worth voting for. But again, that's not the case. That's not the world we're living in. Again, we'll just have to see how these results go through. I'm like keeping an eye on Iowa and even Missouri because of the abortion ballot measures, but that might just be what like helps win her over in unconventional ways. But this kind of like, historical, loss of like, people trying to claw back their rights in direct ways might be what really saves this campaign, I think, in terms of abortion rights. But yeah, that's where it really feels like there's a main difference on where the two parties are. I know that Trump's policy on tariffs, like his only major economic policy, is also coming back to bite him because the Democrats were able to correctly and successfully counter message that as being a nationwide sales tax, like a really bad one for that matter. So I think that that's something that'll really, be a benefit to the Harris campaign this time around as well.
All right, Nora, thank you for that astute analysis. And again, as I said at the top of the show, with 100% accuracy, the ruling class is probably going to win this one, unless I don't know, maybe we're now being joined by candidates from the Socialist Party USA, William Stodden and Stephanie Cholensky, who are again running at the top of the ticket. So I don't know. Do you got any good news for us? Do you guys think you can make it to 270 and save us from this capitalist hellscape?
We might get 270 votes.
I can pull that off.
Yeah,
That'd be
all right.
great.
Okay. Yeah.
If we were able to do that, that would mean that we had betrayed our socialist principles and have no reason being nominated to this office because as much as I believe in democracy, I don't believe the current bourgeois electoral system would allow that to happen.
Yeah, and you also need to spend about $1 billion to get to 270 in this country. So we were about 999,999,000 and
very a little behind.
short.
I mean, even if you're Kennedy and have tens of millions of dollars, you can't even get on the ballot enough to get 270. So
Actually, that's a good segue into my first question. So for the Michiganders out here, y'all probably didn't even see them. Well, I know you didn't see them on the ballot. And typically, and I'll do a little just quick little backstory here. Typically, I think most of my listeners know this. I'm a member of the Socialist Party USA. I chair the Michigan chapter, but we typically the Socialist Party USA could put their candidates on the natural law ballot line, but Robert Kennedy and his gravelly conspiratorial butt joint that. But yeah, I that's maybe like a good place to start, because a lot of my younger listeners too, we've got a lot of people frustrated, like there's no alternative. They got to choose, ostensibly try to choose between the lesser of two genociders. And there are logistical reasons in the system that, campaigns like yours have a hard time getting, even ballot access, let alone, the kind of resources needed to compete with a duopoly. But could maybe y'all start just maybe give my listeners a little bit of an idea of what those sort of ballot access challenges are for a not capitalist political party?
Sure. I can start by saying that let's take, for example, the state of California. Now, the state of California, we would have needed some percentage, and I don't know what the exact percentage was. I think it was like 2% or something like that of the last total number of people who voted in the election to sign a petition and get that petition, notarized and everything to get it submitted in order to get on the ballot. And so if you know how many people vote in California, I did the math at some point during the season, and it ended up being that we needed something like 207,000 people to sign a petition. And if you know anything about professional petitioning in the state of California, you know that for a lot of people that's actually a job. And the going rate per signature is $4 or $5 per signature. So you're looking at $1 million minimum to make a successful, even to even attempt to get onto the ballot in the state of California. Now, California has 54 electoral votes, and so if you don't have, if you're not on the state of California, you have to find those 54 electoral votes someplace else, like say Nebraska or Wyoming or someplace else, New York or Texas or these kinds of things. But they all have their own extremely high ballot access limits that make it virtually impossible for campaigns without a lot of money and a lot of ground resources, like human resources, to get on the ballot. Jill Stein's campaign for the Greens were quite successful because they had a fairly well organized network of people who were willing to do that sort of ballot access, and they had ballot access, kind of guaranteed to them in a lot of states. So, like a small party like the Socialist Party, where we would have to do all of that work for each of the 50 states to get on the ballot with a very limited budget and a very, very limited number of people, we had these virtually insurmountable odds, whereas the Democratic Party in the state of California is simply grandfathered in. You merely have to name your candidate and submit the paperwork to the state of California. You have to supply your electors and your alternates, and that's 108 people or something like that. And once you get all that stuff turned in, you're on the ballot. Like, you don't have to do anything else. And so the parties that have the least number of structural odds, like the Democrats and the Republicans in each of these 50 states, they have the easiest time getting on the ballot, whereas the parties like us who don't do so well, the states have structural barricades in place to keep us off the ballot, specifically to keep us off the ballot. And what's worse, there's 50 different sets of rules and 50 different sets of barricades that we got to figure out a way to get over in all 50 states. If we're not on the ballot in all 50 states, we're not going to win at all, because people will say, oh, well, you're not on the ballot in all 50 states, so you can't possibly win, so we're not going to vote for you. We're going to go vote for the Democrats. There's just no way to even do it. So even a party that was particularly successful at ballot access like the Green Party will get 0 electoral college votes for all the money and all the time they spent getting on the ballot in all these states, simply because people don't see them as a viable alternative to the two-party system, even though they're on the ballot in something like 44 or 45 states.
Yeah, I mean, just the way the system is set up in general. I want to make clear, though, as difficult as it is, I mean, obviously we are not running to win. Our purpose is actually, one of the things we want to draw attention to is how the system is set up specifically to favor the two parties of capitalism. And one reason I am hesitant to put any faith in reforming the system is it is set up to resist that at every turn. And it isn't just ballot access, it's campaign funding. If you don't
access to media,
even access to the debates, and it is the Democrats and the Republicans. It isn't just the Republicans that are attacking democracy. If you believe that democracy is actually having a viable choice at the ballot box and you don't support capitalism, you are not represented. I'm sorry, especially in the national level. You're not going to have someone to vote for that isn't, actively or willing to fund the genocide in Gaza, that for as far as president, because there's two choices that could potentially win. But again, we are not running to win. We are running to spread class consciousness. We are running because we need candidates to send the message that, look, there are solutions to these problems, and these are systemic problems. Because right now, especially, there are people on the far right that really want Americans to just give up on the idea of democracy, because they've never really seen it work for them if they're working people. And that is a very dangerous place. And what we're selling as far as our candidacy and our campaign, what we're saying is we want economic democracy and political democracy, and we've had neither. So we're selling something completely different, which is honestly a lot more appealing to most Americans across the spectrum.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And as kind of like, so I've ran as a SPUSA SPUSA candidate myself, and One of the things that I think is, particularly interesting, even, even kind of sets it apart from other, third parties. And I guess this is kind of broadly speaking to how a lot of socialist parties kind of view themselves, is that it's not necessarily about installing certain people in certain places. You look at the kind of the platforms, the campaigns that you run, and it's very much about what working people can achieve if we kind of organize organize to make our democracy, our democratic means felt and heard. So I was wondering maybe you could speak a little bit towards that. Is just kind of the difference between kind of a typical candidate who says like, oh, I'm going to do X, Y, and Z, and running as a socialist candidate, which is more about kind of explaining to working class people what they can do through the power of organizing.
Yeah, this is one of the things that I wanted to highlight here, that when we talk about democracy, we don't just talk about liberal democracy, and liberal democracy is a very, very low, kind of requirement for participation. In this country, we see democracy as voting for one or the other of the genocidal billionaires. And that's basically all that's required of citizens in our country. Then they go back to doing whatever they're doing, in their daily life, and they just kind of leave the government on autopilot, and it just sort of runs itself and gets us into wars and kills a bunch of people, and makes a bunch of people's lives miserable all over the world. I think when we talk about democracy, we're actually talking about the people governing themselves. And Stephanie brought up a good point. We don't just talk about the political democracy where people are actually participating in the government of their society, but we also talk about economic democracy, where workers are participating in not only the government of their own individual shops, and the ownership of their own shops, where they're making determinations about what they produce, what they sell it for, how much they want to get compensated, and that kind of stuff. But they're also making decisions as in a separate role as kind of a consumer, where we'd like to see certain things in our society that we're not seeing. For example, I personally would like to see free housing in society. I would like to see a society where no one has to pay for the privilege to live in a clean environment. Now, in a socialist society, I would imagine that the workers would get together and say, well, we need cheap, inexpensive housing stock to give to people so they can actually live out of the cold and live in a secure environment. So they will choose to, at that point, create that, because that's a social good, that we see that as a social need. We'll choose to create that. We'll choose to supply that, not only to people who are specifically poor, but because socialists generally don't agree with means testing, we'll make that available for everybody in society. So that if you find that you can't own a home because you can't afford the down payment, or you can't afford the mortgage or whatever, that's okay, because in a socialist society, we're going to have housing that's available to everyone, where you just go basically say, okay, I'm a member of society, let's get a house. And then that house becomes your house that you live in until you want to stop living in it. Then you return it to the housing stock, and it goes back to the next person. That's something that workers themselves can get together and do. I don't like the idea of the socialists explaining anything to workers. I think workers know, what they want. You just have to ask a worker what they need, and the worker will tell you. I mean, it's not something that we don't own the truth, and we don't have like the magic answer to everything like that. Just ask a worker what a worker wants and what a worker needs, and they'll tell you. And then our job then is to clear out, as activists and as a political party, our job then becomes to clear out the roadblocks in the way of workers advancing to get the things that they want and the things that they need. And then you'll see, when working people are actually making the decisions that benefit their lives, their family, and that kind of stuff, we'll all as a society benefit. And I think that's the essence, I think, of kind of a political and an economic democracy, where people are actually taking charge of the things that directly affect their daily lives and their economic decisions in the society, and governing it for themselves rather than for the benefit of the capitalists.
Yeah, and real quick, I mean, you actually summed it up really well, but unfortunately, it is increasingly uncommon that that this perspective is given, where we are empowering the working class to make these decisions. Even on the left, there are people, unfortunately, that don't believe in our system of socialism from below, where they think that, I mean, personally, I'm skeptical of even leaders with the best of intentions feeling that they can dictate what the ruling class, or what the owning, what the working class needs, and can speak on behalf of the working class. And if you truly believe that, I don't know why you're a socialist. You obviously don't have a lot of faith in the working class. Right now, we're dealing with the situation where we don't have a working class that has a lot of class consciousness and doesn't view things in these terms, unfortunately. And that is why I believe that campaigns like this, and it isn't just about electoral politics, obviously, that is one part of what we do, but campaigns like this are so vital because right now, people aren't being even presented with the right questions. Like they're not even, I mean, I think at the debate, one of the questions was, why should the wealthy pay lower taxes? Why is that beneficial? Not if there should be wealthy people, not if they should even pay lower taxes, not even if we should have taxes or a wage system, but why it's beneficial for everyone when the wealthy pay lower taxes. So we're just, supply side or trickle down economics is just the only way things can be. And, it's the end of history. Capitalism is the only way things could be. And that obviously benefits the owning classes a lot when people don't even know there's an alternative. And, that's one reason we don't get a lot of coverage. We don't get a lot of press, that they keep us off the ballot, because I do believe that Democrats are, I mean, we're not facing a communist revolution in the US anytime soon, unfortunately, at least from my perspective.
Alas.
And I do think it is possible to get to that point in a generation. I do have a lot of hope, but this election is probably not going to go for us. But I do believe that Democrats are more afraid of the left than they are the right, and we're seeing it every day. They keep pandering to the right. What I've been saying is they want, their promise of is fascism tomorrow rather than today, because they say that they are the party that's going to fight fascism, yet they're also the ones that are reaching across the aisle to work with the fascists. So is that really who you want to be fighting fascism? And we know how to fight fascism. We fight it from the left, not by sliding to the right. Sorry, I got a little
absolutely
there.
Oh, no, that's quite all right. I think I'm going to ask one more question. I'll kind of open up the floor. I wanted to kind of ask, I'm going to wrap these two questions together. So there's, I've been thinking about this a lot, again, a lot of discussion about things like, Project 2025, and something I've always been thinking about as a contrast, there's been some discussion of moves towards a general strike sometime in 2028. And ostensibly, that would be whether it's President Harris or Trump or Vance or whatever. I think, we talk a lot about this on the show. Those particular actions in history, not only have they been times where the working class has, kind of quote unquote gotten the goods, but they've also just been really incredible opportunities for people to kind of educate themselves and radicalize. So I was kind of curious, kind of y'all's perspective on, do you think that, the upsurge in labor organizing, is this going to kind of, do you see this as kind of building up that working class muscle to start achieving these pieces of kind of working class democracy that y'all talk about? And also, what kind of maybe unique challenges do you see organizing under respectively a Harris and a Trump administration?
Well, I think with in terms of just of a general strike, I tend to favor a general strike in principle, but I want to make sure that it is it's not kind of like just a free for all. I want it to have a direction, and I think that there has to be a lot of work done among the working class to kind of like to kind of get that kind of unified direction. It's very easy to say, you know, we want to have a general strike. We'd like to have a general strike, but then when you start asking workers to leave their jobs, you know, and you don't have something like a strike fund set up that would that would be able to make sure that they continue to get pay while they're striking and that kind of stuff. I mean, a national union can set a strike fund up, but I think a kind of a decentralized kind of movement would have a more difficult time for that. So that becomes a very easy way for the ruling class to buy off segments of the working class by offering them, we'll give you, 3% pay increase or something like that to come back to work and to kind of leave your brothers and sisters out there in the field. So I think that there has to be a lot more organization before the society's ready for it. I really applaud the movements for grassroots unionizing, especially outside of the Democratic Party controlled AFL. That's really a good thing. I think that's the first step. It's not the last step. It's really just the start of a larger movement. And I guess I would caution against the general strike, just because of the fact that there's not a whole lot of like national united action set up that's necessary maybe to proceed something like that. But that doesn't mean that it shouldn't be set up. I just think that there's like 3 or 4 steps that we got to take before we get to there for it to be the successful thing that we want to think a general strike would be. But it would certainly cripple the economy for sure. I think if you had a real like economy-wide general strike, like a real where you had car manufacturers leaving their jobs and all the Amazon workers, leaving the Amazon fulfillment center and all the Starbucks workers and all these other different, kind of new unions that are forming grassroots and that kind of stuff. It'd be really damaging to the economy, but I don't know how far it would go beyond just damaging the economy as far as getting workers' power as we are at the moment. I think that there's a lot more work that needs to be done before we can actually see success in something like that. In principle, that should be something that we should consider a strategic or tactical goal to accomplish something like that as part of a larger movement. But I mean, like I said, I'm not a spokesperson for the working class. So I mean, if they want to have a general strike, I'll do whatever I can to support it if it comes out. As far as organizing something like that under Harrison Bush or Harrison Trump, I think that it'd be easier to do something like that under Trump. But Trump has really made a lot of inroads among certain segments of the working class who have a lot of these kind of prejudices and these chauvinisms that are left over from even the older labor movements, where someone like the AFL wouldn't allow black union members simply because of the fact that they were seen by white organizers as a threat to white labor. And I think the Republican Party and especially the Trump movement play upon something like that among some segments of the American working class, and they're quite successful with that to some degree. And the Democratic Party doesn't really have a solid, credible commitment to the working class anymore. They're fully on board with the investment and the tech bro class in this country, the professional managerial class, and I don't think that they could even get something like that together. But the AFL is such where they'll still present the Democratic Party as the party of labor, and so I think that they run into those problems when they're with either of those two parties that end up neutralizing the more militant segments of the working class. I think the working class needs, in my opinion, the working class needs to divorce itself from the duopoly. And I don't know how, I honestly don't know how willing, the majority of the workers in this country are to do something like that.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
We can hear you.
I haven't been in the IWW as long as I've been in the Socialist Party USA, but I have been in the IWW as well for many years. And one reason I got involved in the Socialist Party USA in the early 2000s was because of the multi-tendency nature of the party, and I've always said that, you know, we do have a multi-tenancy working class, so we might as well have a multi-tenancy party to represent it. And but to be clear, I'm not claiming that the Socialist Party USA is going to be the party of the working class, or that the working class would only have one party. I will obviously say that our current two-party system does not represent the working class. And in fact, watching the conventions, it seemed like the Republicans were actually making more attempt to speak for the working class in their own condescending and very manipulative way. Than the Democrats were. The Democrats seem to be doubling down on the whole representing the coastal elites idea, which is, I don't know what they're doing. But as far as a general strike, I don't know that it's my decision to make, but I will say that this is how we've always achieved change. It's always been done through grassroots organizing and labor organizing. The political system, and at least in the US, seems to kind of follow behind, and the radical unions have led the way, I would say. And I am proud that the IWW was an integrated union, either from the start or from the one of the first to be. And that is very important, that we not let the owning classes divide us on those lines, which they're trying to do with immigration, they're trying to do with trans rights. I am a intersectional socialist feminist, meaning that I reject liberal identity politics. And I also reject the class reductionism that is fairly rare on the left, but does exist. And I mean, I am not for, I do not believe that we can reform the capitalist system. At best, I think we might get a capitalist welfare state in the US, which would still rely on exploiting the global South. I believe we need an international movement of workers. But if you look at the platform of the Socialist Party of America, which of course the Socialist Party USA stemmed from the Debs caucus of the SPA, we are a different group, but those are our historical roots. So their platform was women's suffrage, and this is in 1901, according to Morris Hillquat, History of Socialism. Women's suffrage, barring children under 16 from working, free public education for all, unemployment and what we know as social security benefits, the creation of I'm using words that, like, public health department, I don't think that's what they called it, but that's what they were calling for. A labor department, a department for occupational health and safety, like a government oversight board of workplace safety, and even the establishment of something like the EPA. And we actually did achieve all those things back what the socialists were calling for in 1901. Obviously, we did not abolish the wage system, and we did not overthrow capitalism, but radicals have written the future. We are at the spearhead of politics. I don't know if that's our role right now. Personally, I see the leftists in kind of a lull, but I don't see a political future where we're not becoming more and more relevant as climate change and wage stagnation, and we see massive climate refugees flooding in. I don't see a future where the policies that we're pushing and the solutions we're pushing aren't drastically relevant to the to what I feel is our most likely trajectory. So whether we achieve it through labor organizing like we always have, or we find another way, it's not for me to decide, but I like being an SP because I can throw my weight behind it, whatever the working class seems to be doing that's successful. And I always stress, as far as when I do things locally, when we go to a protest or event, we're not there to sell the party. We're there because we support the cause. And I think that's something on the left that has really soured marginalized people. And I don't want to speak for them, but I think we have alienated people when it seems like we are there for our own ends to build our own brand or whatever, rather than us actually caring about those issues. And I think that's important that we put that forward, that we join Like if we work with a group like Black Lives Matter, we're not there to convert them to socialism. We are there because we care about Black lives. We care about police brutality. We want to abolish the police and so many of their goals that we share. And I think that's the best way to build a movement. And I think I've seen tendencies of this infiltration model that is the opposite of solidarity in my mind. And I see it at least a lot less in the Socialist Party USA. And I hope that's the way forward, is class solidarity rather than cutting each other's throats all the time.
Absolutely. And, that's really good advice, by the way, not just for, people who are involved in either, Socialist Party USA or just any like political organization. I think that's really good. Anyway, really good advice, especially some of the younger organizers who might be listening to the show, is like, when you are coming into that space, again, like not trying to just kind of shove like newsletters in someone's face or et cetera, but always, coming forward in the spirit of solidarity. So we are at about 10 o'clock right now. I didn't know how long we wanted to keep you guys, but I think what we'll do now, so I'm going to be inviting another guest on real quick to kind of add into the panel here. Y'all can feel free to stick around if you'd like. I also, of course, want to give the floor to any, if my co-hosts had any questions that they wanted to ask you. Was there anything in particular you wanted to say before we kind of move on to the next part of our program?
Yeah, if you're still in a state where the polls are open, go write us in.
Yeah.
There we go.
Don't worry about breaking the law. Just do it.
I don't think it's illegal to do that.
Well, we're in
I
Michigan,
just wanna,
so we just can't do it.
yeah, I was disappointed with the Natural Law Party's choice. I did talk to Doug Dern extensively in hopes of swaying him. But I just want to tell people there is hope. The one reason I do this is because when I turn on the news every day and I see, I mean, I don't need to tell you, you see it with your own eyes. It's really easy to give in to despair and nihilism, but I promise you there's hope. There's people who care. There's people who care about you. There's people working on the same things you care about. And they're not necessarily all that easy to find because we don't have a lot of money and we're all volunteers and we're all way overworked. But this work is so fulfilling. And I am so glad that I started at a young age because it has drastically improved my life in so many ways. And no matter your age, please get active, join a group, do your research, find out what best fits your viewpoint, read our statement of principles, and if you agree, consider joining. If you can't afford it, I will pay your dues. I can only do that for a certain number of people, but as long as I can, the offer stands. Please reach out to me if you have any questions. And don't give up hope because we can do this. And the power is in our hands. We just have to wield it. And I will go in the background, but I'll stick around for any questions and just to listen in.
All right, great. I think I guess unless if any of my co-hosts want to chime in with a quick question. Otherwise, maybe we'll go to a musical break. But Nora, I see, is your a microphone hot? Is it?
Yeah. I was saying, like, I think you bring up a really great point about like needing to like kind of bridge past the divides, even on like and how there doesn't necessarily need to be just one working class party. I think that's a very great point because I think like most of the parties that are on at least like one of the ballots in the country have like run on transphobia to a certain level. Like, for example, like the Democrats have completely abandoned the issue. Harris herself saying that she'll follow the law, which includes the horrific amount of anti-trans laws that are spread across the country. And even Jill Stein's running mate has recently said something about how he doesn't want quote unquote biological men playing sports with women. So I wanted to ask, like, what is your like, how does the SPUSA set itself apart from like the other third party options in that regard? And what else like do we do to like make sure that we other across various, like, anti-capitalist, pro-workers parties that we prevent this from happening in the first place?
Well, I'll just answer real shortly. Bill might be able to go very briefly into some of the more theoretical aspects of the differences. But an anecdote I shared recently was that one of our former presidential candidates was speaking with some, I believe it was people in DSA leadership that were seemingly encouraging him to work more with them rather than the SPUSA, or just bad mouthing the SPUSA, perhaps. And they said, "Oh yeah, the Socialist Party USA, that's the party of criminals and drug addicts and like the homeless." And obviously they didn't know Mimi, and anyone who knows him knows that that was not the way to insult Mimi. He was very excited to learn that we are the party of all of those things, because we are the party of the working class. But we do have a very proud history of dedication to socialist feminism, which people, one of my mentors and people who were in the party before me fought to get, and enabled me to be here today, honestly. And we've expanded that, I hope, to also include people who have gender expressions beyond women that also face, I would say, even deeper marginalization under our current patriarchal system. But it is important to make that distinction, that we're not fighting for like the liberal idea of liberation, if there is even one, because it's always this kind of white savior tokenism stuff. And then there's like the class reductionist side, which it's like, yeah, at worst, they're like, these things are all distractions from the one thing that matters, which is class, which always seems to come from people whose only intersection with oppression is class, or people who are just generally very privileged. Not always, but a lot of times. Or that they're usually a little more measured, and they're like, yeah, we do care about these things, but we have to focus on class now, which I think is really the wrong message to send. Because like when I was a teen, I didn't consider myself a worker, but I knew all about police brutality and homelessness and the effects of capitalism that had nothing to do with working a job, and I think a lot of people identify more with the marginalization they face as a woman or as a person of color, or even, trying to fit the mold of masculinity that patriarchy sets up for people, rather than being a worker. And until we have work class consciousness, that's going to be the case. Not that, well, hopefully if we have class consciousness, all the other forms of oppression go away. I don't count on that. And I don't think socialists should tell people once the revolution comes, we won't have sexism, because we have sexism in our own parties. It's rampant. It happens in the SP. It's actually fairly nice here, but it takes a lot of work to keep it that way. Anyone out there, if that is something you're facing on the left, and I can do anything to help and advocate for you, I want it to be a welcoming space. I don't really want to speak for other parties as far as how they handle those issues. I do think I will stand proudly behind our record on that, especially with trans people. On the Women's Commission, I think we were usually a minority cishet women. So just to be clear, the Women's Commission is about people who are oppressed because of their gender identity, not women, and we really need to change the name. And that is one place I've worked a lot, but we also have a People of Color Commission, and I think we managed to do this without falling into the trappings of liberal identity politics. I hope that answered your question. This is something I tend to go off on tangents about, but if it didn't and you want to talk more, I am going to put my contact information in, and we can.
Thank you very much.
If I can add something to that, it's obvious that I'm what we call a cisgender and heterosexual male. I have a lot of privileges, obviously, just by being who I am in this society. But my guiding principle has always been, as long as I've been a socialist, that the goal is, number one, for everyone in the society to have the same rights and privileges and freedoms to just live unharassed as I do as as a cisgendered heterosexual male. And I think that that's, until we get to that society, my job as the person with my identity, my gender and my sexual identity, is to kind of clear out roadblocks that people like me are putting in the way of people who are trying to advance themselves. One of the most impressive parts of our statement, or our not a platform, but our statement of principles, is that the liberation of individuals and groups comes from them themselves. I can't take on some role as the savior of any group that I'm not a part of, or even the spokesman of of a group that I'm not a part of. But my job as the part of the privileged group is to stop putting roadblocks in the way of other people who are working as they will for their own liberation. I think that the term ally sort of is the wrong term in my case, because I'm fighting my own fight in a parallel way with people who are like me. I feel that cisgendered and heterosexual males can hear it from me better than they can from someone who's telling them that they're oppressing them. Just because we speak to our own kind a lot easier, I think, than people who are a little bit less like us. So I'm sort of fighting my own kind of thing at the same time. It's kind of a parallel fight with people who are working for their own liberation, and in the process, just Stephanie really promotes intersectional uh, uh, socialist feminism, and I really agree with that idea. And that part of that is men doing work with men, and straight men especially doing work with straight men, to try to kind of realize our role not only in the oppression of other people, but also our role in the liberation of society, in that we can do this, we can play a role, we can play a very valuable part, simply by not continuing to oppress people, or not having these attitudes like Jill Stein's running mate expressed, either is a lack of art, or maybe he was sincere about it. I don't know what his positions are, but I have no reason to doubt that what he said he didn't mean. I believe that he actually meant it. Personally, that's neither here nor there. The fact is that he's doing more damage, not only to people who have a transgendered identity, but also the cause of straight men. He's making it so we can't work together and fight for the same thing, which is human liberation. And our part of that is to get out of the way. And to get out of the way really means not kind of being marginalized off to the side. It means to stop working and putting roadblocks in the way of people who are trying to liberate themselves. I believe that people who are in their own struggle for liberation know best what they need. They know best how to do what they need, and they will do it if we stop fighting them on it.
Yeah, thank you for expanding on that. That's those are all the questions I have.
Sure.
All right. Okay, so sorry, I wasn't on my mic was it's cold, not hot. All right. Anyway, all right. Well, again, I really want to thank both of you for taking time on this this election night. Figure out which we had a Green Party member running for Senate here in Michigan earlier. I think like he phrased it like this contest between the puppets of the ruling class, or whatever you want to call it. Yeah, but so I'm really glad that you both had time to hop on our chat. I think we're gonna get back talk. Go take a little bit of a glance back at the horse race. I think we just got joined by another special guest. We are gonna take a quick musical break, and when we come back, again, give you some quick updates on which puppet is getting more of the racist electoral votes to get deeper history. The electoral college is based on slave owners and stuff. Anyway, we'll get into that. But again, Will and Stephanie, thank you both for coming on, and feel free to stay on during the show.
Sure, I'll stick around for a little while and listen to what y'all have to say.
Yeah, and thank you for everything you do.
Oh, shucks. Well, thank you so much. All right. Okay, we're going to put on some music real quick, and then when we come back, we're going to get back into this 2024 election special. As we played the music cue at the top, Armageddon, it's been in effect. Come get a late pass.
What the
All right.
fuck?
Really
Okay,
they really said
okay,
that.
we're back. We're recording again. So I realized, like, okay, so just the folks at home know. So like I'm literally doing everything with my phone now because the internet at the studio is down. So like
Oh, Jesus.
I think y'all's audio of you talking was also playing at the same time as the music, but so anyway. All right.
As long
But
hopefully
anyway, that
nobody
was the coup with the guillotine. I thought that would be appropriate for discussion at the. So okay, so if we could maybe if y'all could maybe help me out, and let us. So what's the latest with the horse race? What's going on with that?
Before we do that, we have two newcomers. Can the two newcomers introduce themselves?
Oh, of course, absolutely, yes. So I will start. Well, let's start. Liano. We've got Liano and Jonathan on the line. And Liano, you might remember Liano. We interviewed them about a month or 2 months ago. Time is fake. But that was around the time of the Democratic National Convention. Liano actually got on to Democracy Now! For unfurling a banner at the Democratic National Convention. Liano, how are you doing on this auspicious evening?
I'm doing good. I'm
All right.
I'm enjoying the horse race.
Yep. All right. And then Jonathan, if you could introduce yourself as well.
Hi, I'm Jonathan Thompson. I go by JT the Voice. I'm a professional voiceover artist in West Michigan and born and raised in Kalamazoo.
All right, great. Thanks for taking. Oh, nice to meet you. But yeah, nice to meet you. Thanks for taking time to come on the show. There's definitely some subtopics that we want to get onto here. I think Nora spoke a little bit to the Cop City stuff earlier. I don't know what the results in Georgia are coming out yet, but let's start there. What's the latest horse hockey coming out of
80, if we're talking about Georgia in particular, some of the bigger cities have not, some of the other smaller cities have come in, but with 82%, this has come from the Associated Press, with 82.2% of the vote, Trump is up.
Hold on a second. Of the vote, is that of percentage of expected vote, or is that percentage of precincts reporting? Because not
that's
all
that's 80. It's 82% of expected votes.
Okay.
Trump is up 51.9% to 47.4%. So, so when I made my calculations earlier, because we were talking about it earlier, when I made my calculations earlier, I don't believe that people who voted Libertarian for Chase Oliver or people who voted for the Green Party for Jill Stein or others, like I personally don't believe that if those people, like how they said it in 2016, if those people were in the race, that they would have voted either way for Trump or Harris. But there are the margins in Georgia, I expected. In South Carolina, I expected, but in Wisconsin, this shouldn't be close. Like the Rust Belt, this Rust Belt area, Pennsylvania. Like I said, I didn't say it to y'all, but I was saying it to the other friends. I was like, whoever wins Pennsylvania, it may end up winning the election. And as of right now, with 53.5% of the vote, Trump is up again, 53.5% of expected voting. Trump is up 50.9% to Harris's 48.2%. Now,
that's like 70,000 votes, though.
Yeah, she's down about 100,000 some change. In Pennsylvania, she's down 100,000 some change. Just so people,
about half the electorate, that's not a big deal, depending on where that other half is.
Yeah, and also just to be clear, as of right now, Chase Oliver has 17,000 some change, and Jill Stein has 16,925. Chase Oliver has 17,483. This is coming from the Associated Press. So even if all of those voters were to combine forces on some Voltron stuff and they all went to Harris, she would still be losing.
Yep.
So this election, and I think I said it before, this election is either going to go one or two ways. Either we're going to have 4 more years of President Joffrey, which is likely, right? Which is the Mad King, right? Or the Democratic Party, which we talked about before when the studio was back at the other place. The Democratic Party picked their neoliberal savior, and I love the fact that they went populist and talked about economics and things of that nature, but they didn't go populist in the way that was effective. They didn't utilize.
Are you talking about 2020 or 2024? I'm sorry.
I'm talking about 2024. I'm talking about right now. Oh. The Harris campaign.
Oh, okay.
The Harris campaign chose to, instead of going populist in the way of using Tim Walz and letting him give the we are the socialism that you don't need to fear. Yeah, right. we're the economic populists you don't need to fear. Right. And in the way that he was able to communicate to voters, instead of utilizing him and his popularity, because he was the most popular candidate out of these 4, they chose to hide. And then when they chose not to hide, Harris chose to be associated with the neocons of the early 2000s.
Yep.
And it made no sense. It made literally no sense.
Well, it makes perfect sense. It makes perfect sense. You just have to see it through the right lens. If you look at it from the perspective of, well, what are the parameters that the donors allow the politicians to operate in? Okay, within the parameters that the big donors allow the politicians to operate in, she did about as well as could be expected, as long as she's not going to go outside that very much. One of the things that makes her a very weak candidate in a plutocratic oligarchy like we have is that she doesn't have a lot of pull either with the electorate or with the donors in order to be able to deviate from what the donors want and get away with it. So she's held to a fairly narrow set of policy options because she's decided that she's going to do what the donors tell her to do, which is basically what every other candidate does, except that some of them have more or less pull and deviate more or less, based on that.
Yes,
and I think as Nora brought up a while ago, there's a lot of those Lincoln Project donors who are kind of dictating what's how the campaign is projecting itself. Go ahead, Laura. So just get that thought out there.
Yeah, yes, and the thing that I think I'm talking about for me more in particular is that yes, politicians don't respect nothing but money and violence, right? That if you don't have a movement behind you that can actually affect their power, then they care more about money, right? Yeah. And how that money will influence the party. We saw this earlier during the primaries when AIPAC and other affiliated groups dumped millions of dollars into Jamal Bowman and Cori Bush's campaigns and got them out of here. And those same donors are also donating to Kamala Harris in the rest of the Democratic Party. I
100%.
get that.
Yep.
I get that.
Did you see what Netanyahu did today?
Oh no, I saw.
Yeah.
But my point is this: after you raised $1 billion, after you've raised $1 billion, you didn't raise $1 million, you raised $1 billion. Why not switch the messaging to be like, look,
because she's not she's not a radical, she's not a revolutionary.
It's not about being a radical or revolutionary. You can change the messaging and the framing. You can lie. Politicians lie better. Okay, like Jesus, like that's all you. That's all you.
You a liar. You're supposed to lie.
Right.
The problem is that her base doesn't
capital L Times New Roman font. Okay, lie. Something. Jesus. Like my point. I'm not to interrupt y'all or to filibuster. The point that I'm getting to is that when you look at the fact that you had 20% of your own voters during the primary say, we need you to get out of Gaza so that we can support you, and we need a ceasefire. You choose not only to abandon them, but to spit in their eye. The mainstream media consistently blames Black men for not showing up for Kamala Harris, knowing that the two highest voting populations in the Democratic Party are Black women and Black men. 80 to 95, 90 to 80%.
Yeah.
You have the Republican Party consistently showing you that they are the racist, misogynistic, we are cool with Epstein party, and you still lose. You're still losing.
Yeah, but you understand why. I mean, the reason is this is what happens when you run the establishment candidate against the anti-establishment candidate. I mean, now that Trump is fighting basically the federal government, the DOJ and all of that, he's very much in the mode of the most anti-establishment that you could be. He's going to rip it all apart. And there's a lot of people that are just done with the establishment. And
they stole the framing. He did steal the framing.
What's that?
Trump and the Republicans stole the framing that they are the anti-establishment change people when they're not. They didn't
steal the framing. Come on, Harris abandoned that framing. Harris chose to be the establishment.
Yeah, not just Harris too. Let's not forget.
I'm just saying she made the same choice that what's his name made after LBJ dropped out. He said he chose to stick with the policy.
You talk about Hubert Humphrey. Humphrey.
Yeah, he chose to stick with the policy of the current administration, and he lost. And it's largely because he stuck with their policies. And this is again what we're seeing here is that if she loses, it's because she didn't go with the things that were anti-establishment. And the problem with doing things that are anti-establishment is because the anti-establishment stuff is the big donor stuff. And that's where we keep running into problems.
I also think America has a hard time accepting a lot of things that Kamala would have to say. Because when I listen to her speak, I say, oh, she's going to do better business with me than Trump would. She's over here talking about small businesses, home buying. That's up my alley. That's right where I am in life. And so that sounds like you got a way forward.
Anti-price gouging rules, right?
Yeah.
Basic stuff. But when you have all the billionaires coagulating on the other side and coalescing to form this weird, it's really just kind of a greasy grift is what it is. you
Not
can't
to-
even really have a conversation with somebody who supports them without first getting on the same page about lingo and education. And really, a lot of America just lacks the education to think critically about this. When they hear what Trump says, it sounds like some stuff they would say off the cuff after a couple of Budweisers at the bar. You know what I mean? So, like, yeah, I can understand where he's coming from, but this guy has no life like yours. He detests your life, you basic Americans like me. You know what I'm saying? And for you to not get that is because you lack education. You missing a lot of context about the world, which you gentlemen have been dropping all night. So I think that hopefully enough people figured it out that Trump is just vile, and you're really voting for a person. I had so many people use excuses why they're voting for Trump. The man is vile.
Yeah.
And if you can just excuse that, then there's really not much that you're not going to put past because you want a team. And I think we've shifted so far right that, I think Stodden had a good point that the Dems are basically the old GOP. They've been blocking the progression of this country, really hard. And I'm gonna say this one last thing, and I'll shut up for a little bit. But I think one of the biggest things that we got going on in America that causes the Republicans to still be necessary is we don't have Medicare for all. If we had that, then the Republicans wouldn't be able to run on trans issues. They wouldn't be able to run on abortion. They wouldn't be able to run on a whole bunch of other issues that are medical based. Your job would not be holding your insurance over you, holding your health care over your head to make sure you're a good brick worker. You know what I'm saying? So, a lot of people are voting against their own interests, and they don't even know why, because they simply lack the education about it.
Well, I don't think it's that so many don't recognize that he's vile. I think that I think that the margin in this race may well be the people who fully recognize that he's vile, but either number one refuse to vote for the candidate that's currently doing genocide, and number two, just hate the establishment that much that that they don't care, and that they think I think a lot of it is that some of them think it's funny the way that the establishment reacts to the stuff that he does, and they just don't care anymore, largely because they're generally relatively well situated. I mean, the thing about Trump voters that we learned earlier is that they're not necessarily all low income. They're more in the middle and up. But so they're doing all right in the current situation, to the point that they don't feel like it's worth like it's worth keeping. It's not that they feel like they're doing all right in the current economic situation or the current general situation, just that they feel like they feel secure enough to try to overthrow what's going on. They feel secure enough in what they have currently that they can ride out whatever might come from that. I mean, I think that I'm not saying that's a big slice, but I think that's going to be some
Definitely
kind of
there.
more in the margin.
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, this man's been running for president for 9 years. He had the presidency for 4. He ran again. It wasn't just that he got convicted of sexual abuse of women. It's also, there are ledgers, and in the Florida documents, a 13-year-old said that he assaulted her sexually. Not allegedly, because it's in court documents. We have seen who this man is. And it is not something, it's not something that you can't say that you don't know who he is by now. Like, he's been in the public eye, especially on a presidential level, getting free media attention for over 9 years. Now, it is on the other candidate to point that out, yes, but it's also the media and the other candidate to frame it and communicate it so people can get it. When they were talking about the Republican Party being weird, saying that we're not going back to that type of presidency, that's when they were winning. When they came out with the energy of we're for the working people. That's when that's when Harris and her party was winning. And when she started to dip in the polls, if we're doing pure media analysis, is when she started moving to the center, and they dropped all of that rhetoric. When she, it's not that she wasn't doing interviews, because she did do the Fox News interview, which I thought was good. I do think that her and Waltz should have went on Joe Rogan, because that is the biggest podcaster in the world. They should have went on there and made their case, or at least send Waltz to make his case, to make their case. They should when you are getting questions like, what would you have done differently, separating yourself from Gaza, that was one of the biggest issues across the board for not just Muslim Americans, but also a lot of undecided voters. So,
especially young people.
Yeah. So a lot of these,
like I mentioned at the top of the show, like early voting among young people was just in the toilet this year.
Yeah.
But go ahead.
A lot of these unforced errors by the Harris campaign made it easier. And again, I still think that the mail-in votes will save a lot of us, will save a lot of these close races. But there was a lot of unforced errors that that campaign chose to do, because they chose not to fight and speak on their platform aggressively, consistently, in the free media space that they were given as presidential candidates on a major ticket. And as of right now, it's not looking good. It's not looking good.
But think about this. You're looking at it from the perspective as if the most important priority for them is to win. But it's not. The most important priority for them is to stay within the parameters that the big donors set. Okay? Because we do not live in a democracy. Okay, I've got a whole Substack where I'm talking about that. If you'd like me, I'll put it in the chat. We live in a plutocratic oligarchy. That means plutocratic means rule by the wealthy, and oligarchy means rule by the few. So rule by the wealthy few. We live in a system like that, and we have an elaborate illusion of having some control over that to some significant degree. So when you look at it from the perspective of we're a democracy and why aren't these people behaving appropriately, you're accepting the illusion. You're buying the gaslighting. And what you have to look at is what is actually their primary goal. Their primary goal is to serve the donors. So if they serve the donors by losing, okay, that's fine. Okay, that's fine with them. Okay, it's not that the candidate is not devastated. Okay, but the parties, the consultant classes, and the politicians that they that they nurture, those people are going to be fine. They're actually going to do better financially under a Trump administration, because all of the back to brunch liberals are going to wake up and start giving a bunch of money.
Oh, no, don't get me wrong. I am not under any illusion that these politicians do not serve their donors. Like, do not get me wrong. That I thoroughly understand that. My point is, I understand that this is sometimes the Washington Generals versus the Harlem Globetrotters when we see politics, when we see this. I get that that's the game that we're looking at, but at the same time,
analogy, yeah.
But at the same time, you cannot, if that was the case, if what you were saying was strictly the case, the donors would have kept Biden in the race. They wouldn't have switched out Harris. If it was purely on the, hey, we're going to keep giving money to Biden, because they still were, until they realized that small money donors, which are a large portion of the legal money that you can give, that we stopped giving. And that's when they decided to change. Because again, politicians are gangsters. They respect none but they respect power and paper.
Well,
That's it.
they saw a better deal and they took it.
Yeah, no, yeah. But they were forced to, because initially they were trying to sell us that stepped-on product.
Mm-hmm.
And then when we said we're not buying it, then that's when they switched over.
Yeah,
I
haven't seen those statistics particularly, but I have no doubt that's very, very likely. Yeah.
No, the issue that I have, and this is the reason why we call ourselves Media Cyphers, because I'm looking at this from the media analysis. I'm looking at the media analysis that we give when you hear MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, the Associated Press, and all that. For example, I was talking about the Epstein story. The Epstein story has been in the news since last Thursday, but it's the Israeli Times that's wrote about it. It's the Independent that's wrote about it. It's Huffington Post, a British news outlet. You haven't seen CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, or any of those websites talk about this story. The only American journal outlet that talked about it was the Daily Beast, and that was it.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk about stories that did get all the news coverage, the dude that cracked a joke at Madison Square Garden, we heard about that ever since it happened. Forgetting the fact that Rudy Giuliani talked about Palestinians were terrorists since they're 2 years old, and one of the other speakers said that the Democratic parties are a bunch of pedophile degenerates that hate Jews. There was a bunch of vile, nasty stuff that happened at that rally that did not get nowhere near the same coverage, and that's more representative of the party itself. So when you don't see that stuff, when you don't hear that stuff, when you don't hear when when you see Walt sit down with undecided voters and he flips their mind and their vote in real time, and you see that they were not utilizing that. You see that they're running a party and they're running, but there are unforced errors that old guard is doing that has now potentially slow walked us into fascism.
Well, but we've been fascist for a long time. Mussolini's definition of fascism, he coined the term, is a combination of state and corporate power. That describes our quote-unquote healthcare system perfectly. It's a combination of state and corporate power that literally murders 68,000 specifically poor people, disproportionately women and minorities, every single year like clockwork. We don't call it a genocide because they're connected by being poor instead of connected by being Jewish or being black or something like that. But if we're murdering 68,000 specifically Jewish people every year like clockwork, we call it a genocide, no problem. But because it's poor people, we don't pay that much attention.
I actually kind of want to interject there, and just like that particular point, I think gets at the heart of a lot of people's anxiety about this election cycle in particular. Obviously you've got things like Project 2025, which has this very just like Christian nationalist playbook that is certainly I think scary in the sense that because I've seen some people on the left dismiss it, and I really wouldn't dismiss it on him because, like, again, it is a lot of it is a very huge ratchet to the right, particularly towards Christian nationalism, these sort of grievance politics. And, more importantly, it has very detailed, strategies on how they're going to accomplish all of these things. At the same time, there was this, this great article that was just published by Nina Turner. Is basically the thesis of it was, this sort of, kind of rightward shift that we're witnessing, from Trump and the Republican right is as American as apple pie. So it's almost like, you certainly get a lot of kind of liberals making the Nazi comparison, and, there's definitely, there's some vectors there. But much of what we're seeing now are just, again, a lot of things that historically are extremely precedented, very, very precedented here. And, even going back to kind of George Jackson's thesis on fascism, Blood in My Eyes, one of my favorite kind of mid-60s Black Radical books. Kind of, yeah, laying out that thesis that we exist kind of under a form of fascism, but it is becoming more overt, and certainly the escalation on a lot of our everyday rights is ratcheting up. So okay, I can't even quite remember exactly where I was going with that. Well, I guess except to say, it's kind of worth thinking through, to my listeners as you're looking at the election results with some degree of dismay. Regardless of what happens or who gets elected, we have been here before, and that should be on one hand reassuring, but also kind of scary, because American history is full of some very nasty incidents, and what the antidote in either case was, of course, organize, organize, organize. I kind of want to open that up to a broader question too, of we're looking at these election results. It's still kind of flip a coin. It's kind of leaning more towards Trump at the moment, but there's a question that Stephanie asked kind of up in the group chat that I thought would be good. It's like, what does the future look like? You get our crystal balls. Like, what are the future of these capitalist political parties and our movements, depending on whether we get a Harris or a Trump victory. And I'll hand it off to both of you. I think you both probably have a lot of eloquent commentary on this, but a couple things that pop off to me are just glass half full. If Trump ends up winning, I think there's a couple of things you can take away from that. It will the liberals will necessarily have to leave brunch. And that is also a period of radicalization. I think it happened in the last cycle too. You had some people who started off maybe more liberal or more just ignorant about politics in general. They were radicalized by like a combination of Bernie Sanders plus the Trump years. I include myself above that. I'm certainly not politically in line or where say Bernie Sanders is now, but I wouldn't be like a Marxist if it weren't for that lived experience. So just again, there will be a lot more agitation in the streets and a lot more chance to organize the working class. I think in the short term, it's going to be very bad for a lot of elements of the American system that people rely on. A lot of that Project 2025 stuff is about like dismantling what little chunks we have of the welfare state. I'm personally worried about I have a sibling on SSI. What's that going to look like? A year, 2 years into the new Trump years. Yeah, I think we look at what might happen in the coming years, and Trump getting reelected is going to be awful to live through, but I think it could be a period of deep kind of radicalization. If Kamala Harris gets elected, I do have a concern about just kind of continued malaise. A lot of these problems continue to go unchecked, and we just keep snowballing, and possibly get something even worse in the future. Although one other point, and then I'll stop filibustering myself, is it is interesting to note that the Republican Party has not really been able to recreate that secret sauce of whatever Trump has brought to the table. People have tried to replicate his politics. I think of people like J.D. Vance, people like what's his name from Florida?
Sanctimonious.
Yeah.
Sanctimonious, yeah. And none of them got the juice. Trump is kind of lightning in a bottle because he does have this we often call him like, the fascist game show host and stuff, but he has the charisma of a game show host. He knows how to work a crowd. He knows like how to sell a lot of this stuff that his Republican colleagues
to give you an answer to that question. After Trump is going to be Tucker Carlson. That everything that you have seen, everything that you have seen from Tucker Carlson, from him moving to him now being the most Christian of Christian people, to him writing his book, to him trying to build this cult of personality. He was trying to do it on Fox News, even though he said in the leaked tapes that he hates Trump and doesn't want to talk about him anymore. Everything that he has done, if you actually paid attention on how, hey, going to Russia is not that bad. They have nice bread. Maybe we shouldn't have democracy. All of that BS that he was doing, he is the next person that the Republican elite will pick up. The problem is we have someone who wants to be a dictator, who didn't mind when his vice president, when they told him that his supporters wanted to hang his vice president, who said recently, I should have stayed in power, getting another crack at it. And that's the issue. It's the issue. The issue wasn't, I have very substantive issues with Kamala Harris outside of Gaza. If you want to call her a carceral feminist and in the way that she looks at a lot of her ideology and policy, legitimate criticism. If you want to talk about a lot of her foreign policy and things of that nature with Gaza, legitimate criticism. But this whole election was about picking your opponent, not picking your savior. And we picked, and what it looks like, it's not over yet, but if we have Trump, we have chosen to play the Dark Souls version of America for the next 4 years. Right?
Oh my God.
We chose to go hard to paint when we could have went with somebody that was much easier to play. We could have picked a game that was much easier.
Right.
It wasn't going to be easy, but it was easier to push. The Republican Party now and Trump's party, MAGA now, they know, no, we're just going to take things by force. And that's the issue. Because the right always has a monopoly on violence, and they've always had a monopoly on violence in this country. That's the crux of it.
And let's take a look at how we got here too. I mean, you have people like Mitch McConnell who basically enabled Trump as opposed to crippling him because they figured we're going to need his star power to keep in power. He had all the opportunities to just impeach that dude and be done with it, but he told them no.
Yeah, Lindsey Graham.
And then he had to sit there and deal with it. And he hates Trump, but the turtle is just not the guy for the job when it comes to taking out the trash. He was the one that said, I got 400 bills on my desk because this is where, liberalism comes to die. I don't think that's the direct quote. But anyway, he didn't care about actually progressing things for America. He wanted to stop things systematically and keep things the same. That's what it means to be conservative. I don't want things to change at all. I like things the way they are. And when you have people crying out saying there's something wrong with this country and everybody's pointing the finger at who's doing it wrong. And meanwhile, George Carlin tried to tell y'all the rich people are just taking it and walking away laughing. And one of the biggest problems that I got with MAGA, the whole MAGA movement, is Christian nationalism, because they taking my Jesus, they're doing something different with it. I'd like to read you Matthew 19, 23 and 24. Then Jesus said to his disciples, I tell you the truth, it is very hard for a rich person to enter the kingdom of heaven. I'll say it again. It's easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than a rich person to enter the kingdom of God. So when Brett Favre tweets, if everybody cared about God, this is how the map would look like and everything is all red. You are not entering the kingdom of God. What did Jesus tell people to do? Love God with everything you got and love your neighbor as yourself. Does build a wall sound like loving your neighbor? Does refusing to pay for health care sound like loving your neighbor?
Wait. It's
They're saying,
robbing
I don't
poor
want my
people in
taxes.
Mississippi.
They're saying, I don't want my taxes to go to broke people. Does that sound like loving your neighbor? I don't think so. To say, I don't want my taxes to go to war, that sounds like loving your neighbor. And this is the thing that the Democrats could not capitalize on, and it was really going to be antithetical to the Christian nationalist movement. But when Trump says, I'm going to end that war over there in Israel immediately, that's because he's going to give Netanyahu all the weapons. He going to probably just give him the bombs. We'd be done with it, man. Take him out. You got 45 days. It's going to be done. Flatten the whole place. Get rid of everybody. I'll tell you something interesting. So I am a professional voiceover artist. And early on in my career, I had somebody try to take me off the site that I was on and do some stuff for me. But the thing that they wanted me to do was about the Hezbollah terror tunnels, which is the voice that I used to do the audition. And they wanted to take me off site, which is risky. Oftentimes you don't get paid. You can get screwed over going off the site. So I didn't bother doing anything with them. But I often think back to that now, seeing that that's an actual thing, that there's old tunnels over there, but I just don't know how much reality there is to it. The video that they showed me was really cheesy, and it looked kind of like cheap propaganda. But I've never been to Israel. I've never walked around there and checked out the tombs of the Holy Land. But it's something that stays on my mind when people keep talking about God. You notice they talk about God a lot, but they don't really talk about Jesus. You know what I'm saying? And Jesus was a very pacifistic kind of dude until he found people representing his father wrong. Then he braided a whip and went in there and bust some heads. So there's a time for everything. And Christians feel like, I need to have my time where I can go be violent for God. And the way that they envision it is like the children of Israel trying to go and erase the land of their enemies so they can go and settle in it. But the people at the heads of that party are saying the enemy is within. So now you got to go cut some of yourself out, America. And the thing that gets me is the minorities who don't get, you are the one on the chopping block. When it comes to it, they're not going to want you. You're still the other. You still an N-word to them. Don't matter what high school you went to. And you were one of the few. No, it don't matter. We still going to be the other. And once you recognize that about yourself, George Carlin was on the money. He said it's an exclusive group, elite group, and you're not part of it. And so many people didn't get that memo. So many folks. Hey, somebody else say something. I'm all worked up.
Oh yeah.
I just want to echo one quick thing. Brett Favre has a special place in hell. Do you know how
this
low of a person you have to be to steal money from poor people and then use that money so that your daughter and their university can get a better gym facility? There are people in that state that doesn't have clean water. Yet he stole money from those people from in Mississippi. He stole money from those folk that needed that money so that they can have a better material condition, they can have some dignity. And they stole that money so that the university of his former university in alma mater can have a better gym facility. I don't believe in Dante's Inferno version of hell, but if that was a real place, he's on the 8th level. He's on those 9 levels. He's on 8. He dances between 8 and 9. Okay.
Well, how about
I have a quick thing, and then I'll toss it to you, Liano. I some kind of popcorn thought about again, the Democrats are inept at kind of challenging Christian nationalism, and I think part of it all goes back, and this is kind of a point that Liano was bringing up, is like they have certain strategic parameters that they cannot use. Like let's say like the message of somebody like William Barber, who I think recently, just a couple days ago, did go out and say, people should vote for Kamala Harris because, again, you look at the other side, whatever. But if you were taking notes or cues from somebody like William Barber, who is one of the great liberation theologians around, he helps run the Poor People's Campaign, it would be in the bag. But they, again, the Democratic Party, because the way it operates is necessarily listening to this consultant class that thinks it's a better idea to run as the second coming of George W. Bush. And, even with that, it's all aesthetics. They can't do anything substantive because, again, the answer to that Christian nationalism is, the kind of the opposite pole is that sort of liberation theology. But Democratic Party is not a place where they can embrace that because that is a direct challenge to capital. And so, again, you're just left with a lot of empty aesthetics to the point where it's like you can say, oh, we're also Christian, but like, much like a lot of their politics, they come off as just like a diet version of like the proto-fascism that is going on the right. Immigration is a really great example of that. Foreign policy, to an extent, they're almost more hawkish on certain things, but it's this example of how they are trying to wrap neoliberalism with populist aesthetics, and it looks wrong. It's gross. It's like those horror movies with like a monster puts on human skin. Like it just doesn't work. People can tell right away. Whereas Trump, he's over there. He is like he's a monster, but like everybody knows he is. He's just like he talks about it. He brags about it. I'm the most monstrous monster that ever monstered. Whereas you got like this weird creature in a skin suit saying, oh, look at Tim Walz. He's everybody's dad. It's like, can I talk about what I did? No, you can't. All right. Okay, Liano, go ahead. Sorry.
No, that's okay. I was gonna go back to you. So you had a question before, and you said, and then you went and talked for a while. And one of the things that you talked about was Project 2025 and that. And I just want to emphasize that Project 2025 is nothing new. They compiled that out of a whole bunch of old right wing BS, going back decades and decades and decades. One of the earlier versions was the Powell memo, which we've known about since the mid 1970s, and we've known them. They've been writing papers about this. They've been upfront about this. We've known what they wanted to do for decades, and the Democrats have done nothing about it because they don't fight. And that's the key thing about Trump is that he fights, and the Democrats don't fight in the same way. They don't champion something that their constituents really want. I mean, they champion some stuff that we would like. Okay, it's better than not stuff that we would have, but it's not actually something that we want. Okay, so that's the difference between that's the difference between the ability to get people juiced up on the fight stuff. Like somebody was saying, he was like he's like a wrestling hype man kind of a thing. Okay, who knows how to get people riled up on the fight stuff. But our side doesn't only knows how to try to get people riled up on the on the issues, on the not with the same kind of not with the same kind of bite to the fight. Does that make sense?
Oh no, absolutely. Just one last little note about the Project 2025 thing. Like, it is so important, I think, for our listeners to understand. Like, that's part of a continuity. Of the Powell memo, which was basically a capitalist manifesto in the late '60s, early '70s, and the Reagan, Project for a New American Century. The only probably unique thing about Project 2025 that I found was like, and it's not even necessarily the emphasis on filling the federal government with personnel, because it's almost like the parties will kind of focus on different things throughout the years. Like it's interesting, back in the '80s, the whole Chevron decision, that was something that the Republicans actually liked back in the '80s, because back then the Democrats kind of held the court more, kind of flip flop. But I digress. one of the interesting things looking through Project 2025, and granted, I haven't read the whole thing. I've read significant excerpts of it. Is if when you compare it to the prose in the Powell memo or New American Century, the people writing Project 2025 are significantly dumber. Just just put it bluntly. Like these people, say what you will about Powell or Kissinger or some of the like the really evil capitalists of the 1670s. They could explain to you in like actual like terms what a socialist is or a communist is or what those systems are. And it's Project 2025. It, again, part of some of those previous memos was talking about deregulating media so that we could, basically more effectively, brainwash the electorate. It's like the chicken's coming home to roost, the dummies taking over the dumb house. Where and you're looking through this thing and like these people are confusing like liberal Wall Street people with hardcore communists and like all this other stuff. And it's like you read it and it is the biggest difference is like one, it's just mean spirited, but also it is just so catastrophically stupid. Like they really don't understand how so many of these things work. Now, a lot of the strategies they've outlined are very clever to accomplish what they want to do, but I don't know that's almost just kind of like that is going to be one of the really tough things in the next 4 years because we have an opponent, especially if Trump wins, that is again revels in that kind of particular viciousness, and is not afraid to like go after marginalized people as a matter of course who it perceives as moral enemies. That is kind of a new fold to these type of like capitalist master plans that we've seen, as you pointed out, Liano, as we've seen recur across the decades.
I just want to say, as people, as because most of us is from Michigan, I just want to say, I'm sad as a Michiganer, as someone who cares about Michigan and cares about Michigan a lot. Like, what are we doing? What are we doing, Michigan? What are we doing, fam? Like, I get.
Oh, did they call it for Trump or
no? They
I have no way to look at it.
So I'm looking at 28.8 of expected voters. Trump is leading in Michigan, and like I'm so I'm going back to the horse race. Georgia still needs to come in. Like I said earlier on this broadcast, and I'm gonna stand by it. I said whoever wins Pennsylvania is more likely going to win. I stand by it. I guarantee it. Like Frank Lucas said in American Gangster, they like I as of right now, Harris is down by 4 points, by 3 points and some change in Pennsylvania.
How
She's
many
down, huh?
What percentage? What percentage report? What percentage of votes are in?
71.9% of expected voting. She's down by 3 points and some change. She can still make that up. I hope that she does. North Carolina, she's down by 1.2 points in North Carolina with 87.7% of the vote. This is again coming from the Associated Press. If you want to follow it with me, you can. Trump has 50.8%. Harris has 48.1%, and all others is less than 1%. In Pennsylvania, all others is less than 9%. And in Georgia, 88.4% of the vote. 51.1% went to Trump, is at Trump, and 48.2% is with Harris with 88.4%. Now, I do also want to remind everybody that there were bomb threats that was going down in Georgia earlier. There were threats of violence earlier that was being reported in the media of urban areas and Black women in particular being threatened. I did hear that from multiple news sources. It's not looking like it's looking shaky. I ain't gonna lie to you. But as of right now, I'm looking at the New York Times as well. As of right now, Arizona, Georgia, Michigan, North Carolina, Wisconsin, and we haven't got to Nevada yet, but all of the major swing states that they both needed to win, Trump is either leading or very likely to win. He's point one. He's point one. He's point 13. Point 13 in Arizona, +3 in Georgia, +5 in Michigan as of right now. We're only 33% reporting, +3 in North Carolina, +4 in Pennsylvania, +3 in Wisconsin. But again, not everything hasn't been set in stone. It's only 64% in Wisconsin. It's only 72% in Pennsylvania. It's only 88% in North Carolina. It's 32%. In Michigan, it's 93%. In Georgia, and it's 55% in Arizona. It's looking a little rough. But we still haven't. But the mail-in votes hasn't come in yet. So take it with a grain of salt.
All right. Stephanie, what did you want to ask about? You said you have a question about Michigan politics.
Yeah. I was just curious. So you may or may not know we did have a little bit of luck getting Socialist Party members elected here in Minneapolis. And I know that you have a similar situation as us, at least in the more urban parts of Michigan, with the Democrats kind of controlling everything. I was wondering if there was any desire to or possibility of running in uncontested elections and challenging the Democrats from the left. Now, like, there's different strategic reasons to do that. You might want to do it because you actually do want to improve the material conditions of workers, or just to, get a different platform out there. Personally, I wouldn't recommend doing it to try to drag them to the left. We did start a ballot access working group in the Socialist Party USA, and I think it is a very good group that will be helpful for both local and national campaigns. But I'm just worried. I'm just wondering if that is a possibility in your state, and if any of the parties have been trying that at all.
Can you please be a little bit more clear about what exactly the thing is that you're asking if we could do here?
If you think it could be done, or if it has been done, as far as running against Democrats I'm guessing they have basically uncontested on the very local level in elections. Like we got 2 school board members in the Board of Estimate and Taxation, the chair elected here in Minneapolis, with a handful of people. And I mean, it was mostly the candidates that got elected. It wasn't the party's help that got them elected, because they were good organizers and community leaders. But is that something, do you think, I don't know the differences between our 2 states as far as how feasible that would be. And I would say it seems like, especially in Detroit, the Democrats are a lot more open about their corruption. I don't know if that's helpful or harmful as far as that strategy, but is that something? I know you had a Marxist judge way back when, but is that something that's been tried, or do you think would be feasible in the near future?
Well, I'll start. I'll start with that, Liano, and then I'll do it to you. I know I've actually run for office before, and it is a little different. Again, every city is a different story, but I mean, the short answer is yes. Those are achievable. you typically, any advice I would give to somebody who wants to be like a kind of an insurgent leftist candidate working outside the Democratic Party, it's like you need to develop lots and lots of community relationships. You need to really be like kind of just well known as an organizer in your community, and be prepared to you're gonna have to try it a couple times. I was third to last when I ran for city commission in 2019, but when I ran for library trustee the next year, I was in spitting distance. Like it was about 1,000 votes, something like that. And especially in bigger cities, again, it kind of depends because there's a little bit more of a kind of party machine in bigger cities like Detroit, but I will say there has been success in some of those insurgent candidates and campaigns, and it's worth mentioning like the most kind of politically radical member of Congress currently is from Detroit, so there is that. Liano, I don't know if maybe you want to speak to that.
I didn't quite catch it. The last thing that you said, or what we were just talking about in general was I was just going to say right now, my friend Kathy Albro is running for a state house seat, and she used to be the chair of the Democratic Party Rural Caucus. In fact, she founded it and built it up and left because of shenanigans from the party and has gotten the endorsement of several Democratic Party clubs there, even though she is running as an independent. Um, and she's been very careful about that kind of a thing. But so I have no idea if she'll win or not. But we were asked before about the future of the party, and I you know. We're gonna forget about the future of the party. Put that aside. The future of the left has to be, in my opinion, doing the kind of organizing that Stephanie was just talking about, where we have to have organizations that help local communities organize themselves and deploy the tools of self-government to solve their problems, including the problems of the political problems that we have. Politics is just another problem that we've got to solve, and one of the best ways to solve problems is actually through democracy. I can talk about that if you're interested. Um, but um, so uh, yeah, I just lost my train of thought. I went in too many different directions at the same time. What did you want me to touch on next?
It happens.
Yeah.
I'm gonna keep it. I'm gonna keep it all the way. I'm gonna keep it all the way real with you. The idea of running in uncontested elections and trying to push the Democrats to the left, especially in Michigan, with the way that the party apparatus is set up in Michigan, it is damn near impossible.
I agree. I agree.
You're going to have to. Again, I think about this in framing. I think if you was to frame your policies as, hey, these are actually, these are the majority of the country agrees with these policies. These are centrist policies. These are centrist ideas. You would have a better chance of coding your policies as, progressive but centrist, so that you can get the wide scope of voters. But a lot of misinformation on what socialism is, or misinformation on what leftist policies are spread and assumed to be right before others can dispel them. And that's a lot of the issue for me. And I feel like a lot of the issue for a lot of voters. It's all in how you communicate. If you had a politician that communicated that type of message, but did it like how Tim Walz did, right? This is somebody's socialism is somebody else's community. Somebody's socialism is somebody else's neighbor, right? If you code it in that type of language, I feel like you can get it through. But if you don't code it that type of way, I don't think it's gonna work.
Yeah, well, I would suggest not even running in partisan elections if you could avoid it. Of course, my strategy has never been to try to drag the Democrats to the left. One thing we had success with to some extent in North Carolina.
Wait, what did you just say? You said you wait.
You don't want to never been to drag the Democrats.
I mean, the Socialist Party was founded based on the Debs caucus. I'm not DSA, I'm Socialist Party USA, and that is our main disagreement, is that we are independent, we do not work with Democrats, we do not attempt to influence them. So that was the split of the, well, I don't want to pick any fights with leftists, so I'm not gonna.
There's a bunch of lore about that. I think that happened in the 80s, right?
Look,
70s, yeah. But we did have some success in North Carolina with and again, our goal was not to influence the Democrats, because I don't believe in they are a capitalist party. And my goal personally is not a capitalist welfare state. I think the best you would be able to get with that would be that. But us being in the race, and this is like a small group of volunteers, maybe a couple $1,000s at most. We were able to get them to talk about things like police brutality, and actually one of the biggest successes we had was actually getting the endorsement of I think it is NARA, one of the major abortion reproductive rights groups, because we were talking about how we could use local zoning and local laws to protect reproductive rights by stopping the pregnancy crisis centers and by making buffer zones around clinics. Like you can actually do some of this on the local level, and no one was talking about that, but we were able, like showing up at the city council meetings and asking the right questions, confronting the developers when they're talking about affordable housing that's affordable if you're making like $75,000 a year, because Raleigh is one of the most gentrified cities in the country right now. Obviously our goal, and I don't think we even had much influence on the Democrats, but we got people talking about these issues, and that forced them to talk about them. And it isn't that we're trying to get the Democrats to be more left about this. We're trying to get voters and people in our communities thinking about this. And it was a fairly easy way to get a lot of attention with not a lot of work and not a lot of money.
Oh, I think you froze
up there. In tandem with community organizing, though.
You know, I wanted to kind of respond to that too. I know I can't really tell if you quite finished, but I think one of the interesting things to think about is, if we get a Trump victory or even a Harris one, I think there's going to be a general malaise, and especially among young people. If Trump wins, there's probably going to be a lot of anger at this slapshot Democratic Party who lost again to a goofy fascist game show host. And I'm particularly interested in there's a race going on. I think it's Daniel Osborne, or it's maybe Dave Osborne, down in Nebraska. He's running for U.S. Senate as an independent, and he has a pretty decent shot of actually doing it. And he's run explicitly on a pro-union, anti-duopoly platform. But I think there is something to be said, like just the concurrent and cascading disappointments might open up some space for independent parties, third parties to really kind of build that type of momentum. and actually get people elected, even maybe above and beyond the municipal level. I think the short answer is I think it's definitely possible to get people municipal level, and we've seen it before. There's the famous historical example of Milwaukee's sewer socialists. Milwaukee was run by socialists for about a 40-year stretch, I believe. And then again, like kind of Stephanie's alluding to, it's a lot of that back to basics. Yeah, a lot of that back to basics. What does the community need? Go find what we can do about it. That sort of thing. And honestly, I think that kind of politics is going to be really critical. If we have another 4 years of Trump, I think just the errant bankruptcy of kind of this corporate liberal strategy is really going to be laid bare. I think they've gotten off or gotten kind of an artificial boost just because of how awful the GOP has been and how they took away abortion rights. But this would be, if Trump wins, it'd be the first election that did not carry them across the finish line. And I think, with that, people are going to be left, with again, just the corporate wing of the Democratic Party. They are going to be kind of exposed as just completely ideologically bankrupt, which I think creates space for independent candidates and maybe even people who kind of maneuver around, necessarily DSA. Again, I don't agree with that strategy, but I think that does kind of provide a moment and maybe some leverage for when even like brunch liberals are looking for a more radical alternative, having to deal with 4 more years of Cheeto Mussolini. So
Jimmy Dore said the same thing in 2016, dog. Like that, I disagree with that, but at the same time, I hope that you are right. I don't want to be cynical. I don't want to be nihilist, but as much the voters know what they want. We need to be able to get representatives to push for and fight for the things that we want.
Yep.
And we have to move them.
Right.
The voters support universal health care, canceling student loan debt, paid sick leave, anti-price gouging. All of those policies, the overwhelming majority of Americans, Democrats, Republicans, and independents already agree with. We have to, as an American people, organize, strategize, and mobilize and push our representatives who only move because of power and paper to do the will of the people without fear or backlash that the lobbyists are gonna take them off their seats. Because as long as that main narrative happens, we're gonna keep getting stuff like this. And again, not trying to be down or anything of the sort, I feel like yes, getting our messaging right over issues that the majority of Americans want, but we need a populist revolt. We need a actual populist revolt because people on the right and people on the left don't agree with us spending money, giving money and weapons to what happened overseas, to what's going over overseas in Gaza and in the West Bank. The majority of Americans don't agree that when there's a disaster in America that the American people should get price gouged, like what happened in East Palestine, right? What happened in Flint, right? We all agree on the policy. We need to mobilize and show power to those that represent us and force their hand. And if they don't move because they care more about their donors, then we vote them out and get somebody in.
So
we have to communicate. We have to communicate and do that.
So here's I understand what you're saying, but you're operating from the assumption that we're a democracy. before we can before we can do a bunch of that stuff, we've got to get a movement that's actually that can actually put people into office on a regular basis. And we're a long way from that. We're a long way from that. Let me just say, you know, the way that for offices that require hundreds of thousands of votes to win, okay, that's most that like in Michigan, that's a state Senate, I think a state House too, but it's definitely a state Senate seat, and everything higher than that. Okay. We have the problem right now that there are a lot of medium and low information voters that primarily vote by brand. And that insulates the parties from all kinds of different things that we can do under the system, but in large part because they have that brand ID voter, they have a buffer against that. So this is one of the reasons why I think that the way that we have to go about it is to organize outside the party, but also have people from our organization that goes into the party and understands what's happening there. And when there's an opportunity for people to vote, calls our organization in and we can vote there. Because that way we have both an outside influence where we're organizing to run candidates at the local level and stuff like that. And we're talking about people in the Democratic Party getting things moved at the local level in the direction that we want. We don't have to do one or the other. It doesn't take a whole gigantic party organization to have influence on the local Democratic Party. In most counties in Michigan, the local Democratic Party is basically 6 people. Okay, there are a couple of large counties where it's more than that, but basically, if you in most counties in Michigan, if you were to show up at their elections with 10 people, you would win. There are some counties that don't even have a party. Okay, so it's entirely possible to take the party away from the establishment. Okay, but it doesn't matter if we take the party away from the establishment if we can't actually get people elected. Okay, so that's why we need to organize outside the party, but say that, hey, we're a separate organization, but we are in coalition with the Democrats, but that doesn't mean that they get our votes necessarily. They have to work for that. And if we have a better candidate, we'll run that candidate. And it doesn't matter that there's a Democrat running. And we're going to try to change the election rules to say that we have ranked choice voting so that we don't have this kind of a spoiler effect, because that enhances the mathematics that drives our system of elections towards a two-party system. That's one of the things that we have to change as a structural matter so that we can have more than 2 parties.
All right, so Lawrence said he has to dip out fairly soon. I think it is getting kind of late, and you know the way elections are these days. You remember growing up when we were kids and we learned who the president was going to be that night. That was fun.
Yeah.
But so we're probably not going to know before pretty late in the evening. So I think it was kind of wrap some things up. I did just to briefly respond. I think, you know, if Trump ends up winning, or Harris for that matter, the key thing, and I know, Liano, you posted this online, I'm going to say it to all the listeners: organize, organize, organize. You know, I think you know, again, under Trump, we're going to be playing defense on a lot of extra things. That's, you know, going to suck some energy out. But I think we need to keep our eye on the way we've been building up capacity in organized labor. We've been building outside of the box and outside of like the typical more kind of captured union apparatus, and even some of the existing unions are becoming a little bit more radical. So being able to organize and push our weight around as workers is going to be a way to inoculate us to some of the worst excesses of the Trump administration and the Harris administration, for that matter. But it is going to require we need to exercise solidarity and organizing, and you know, here in Kalamazoo, across the state of Michigan, there's stuff like that. I'm hoping to get a renters union going in the next couple of months. And while that might not immediately seem like a response to, you know, Trump or fascism at face value, that kind of organizing muscle is key. It is critical. And if we ever got to a point as a class where we could start having those mass general strikes like we had in the 30s, but again, kind of to speak to Will's point earlier in the show, something pointed, something with support, something with like concrete goals. If we were able to do that, I really feel we could bring a Trump or a Harris administration, and again, the system they represent, to its knees and make it, force it to give us, the working class, some concessions, at least in kind of like the short term. So with that, Lawrence, or anybody who's got a computer in front of them, what's the latest on the horse race? And then we can do some closing thoughts.
192 Harris to 230 Trump, 116 not called yet.
Okay, all right. We'll keep our eyes on that. And I know a lot of people probably staying up pretty late to see how that goes. Yeah, you know, I think, yeah, like some of this underperforming was like, you know, between like Michigan and Georgia strike me as particularly pretty, because like, again, we don't know what those margins are going to be, but it's very likely it could be, it's going to have a lot to do with Gaza. And down in Georgia, if it's close, we mentioned at the top of the show, Atlanta, which is one of like, you need Atlanta organizers really out there in order to carry Georgia, and the local Democratic Party there really alienated some of those people who do that kind of door knocking by you know, being anti-democratic. They got enough signatures for a Stop Cop City ballot initiative locally, and they squashed it, and they basically pissed off the people that could have won Harris, Georgia. So Lawrence, Liano, everybody else in the chat, any closing thoughts? I mean, that was my closing thought. We need to organize our butts off. So I'll just kind of go down the line, closing thoughts as we close out this election special.
I'll save my thoughts to the end. Somebody else go.
All right. So be aware of the red mirage and the blue wave. I'm not terribly worried, but after we get off this thing, I'm definitely gonna pray. I'd like to give a special shout out to my honey bunches. I hope you feel better. And as far as the presidential race goes, remember, it's not the only thing that's important. We got a lot of Senate races and governor races and races for the House, and also your local politics are going to affect your life more than anything else, because that's going to be on a daily basis. So I hope you went out and voted, and may God have mercy on our souls.
Yeah, that's an honest one. I like that. Yeah. All right. Liano?
Well, I just like I wrote online, no matter who wins, the plan remains the same. Organize, organize, organize. That's what we got to do. And you know, either way, under either administration, we have a fundamentally fascist system, as I said before. We have to we have to fight that, and that is not that's not something that's going to be won anytime real soon. So people need to do their self-care, and we need to start relying on each other more, like communicating with each other, and having more community more community. That's the only way that we're going to get through this, no matter
All
who.
right, I think Stephanie, do you have any other thoughts?
I mean, check on your comrades. We're all working real hard, and no matter the outcome, it's going to be rough. I don't know if I know they are saying some pretty frightening things about their plans about deportation and reproductive rights and trans people ability to exist, just speaking domestically. But if we're going to get through this, we do have to do it together. We can't fight each other. We can't throw other marginalized groups under the bus because they're inconvenient. We do have to stick together because that's how we've always gotten through this.
Thank you, Stephanie. And then Lawrence.
First things first. Rest in peace to the GOAT. Quincy Jones.
Quincy. Oh my
yes,
God. Yeah.
Yeah. First things first. Rest in peace to the GOAT. Like I said, like we've said on this program before, voting is one part of your obligation as a citizen of this country. Organizing, strategizing, mobilizing, and making your voice heard so that those who are supposed to represent us, and those who are in power, and those that can that we help issue change, that we make change in our communities, and that we can then push that energy to those who can do it nationally, right? Organizing in your local spaces first, and then expanding it outward, right? We talked about that a lot. I still believe in that. I still believe in the grassroots movements of strategies of like the Black Panther Party and SNCC and others. So we need to start doing that more often. We've seen how labor has organized over the last 4 years and has gotten concessions and won. We can strategize and collab with other organizations like that. And that we cannot lose hope or lose focus or be nihilistic, because when we do, that's when the ruling class truly is won. We have to keep fighting. That is all that we can do until we get the equality and equity and dignity that we are looking for. We have to keep fighting.
Absolutely. And again, I want to thank everybody who came on the show. Nora, Eduardo, Jonathan, Stephanie, Will, Liano, Lawrence, thank you all. This has been a really great show. And again, I want everybody who's listening out there, I will leave with one last thought, and then we're going to play out the show with some music. Sometimes the hardest thing to do as an organizer or just somebody who leftist politics is hope. Hope is not, sometimes hope is something that you have to exercise like a muscle, because it is hard. The times that we are living in, the headlines comes like while I was on my honeymoon, I read a headline about how like last year the carbon sinks didn't work, which could accelerate climate change exponentially. And it's hard to have moments like that where either that happens, or maybe like Trump wins the election, or even Harris wins the election. It's just more of the same. It's hard to look at those and not feel a bit of despair, but there is that famous line, don't let this lead you to despair, let it radicalize you. Sometimes it's like, man, I think I'm about as radical as I'm going to get, so I'll despair. But it's important for us to, the odds are against us, but the odds have always been against working class movements. And it was those who planted their feet in that small percentage of a chance that they were going to win. Those were the people who created the space for a better future and a better tomorrow. And those are the people that we are going to need to be today. All right, everybody. Thanks for joining me. Everybody out there in Radio Land, keep on fighting for that revolution solution.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.